But you wound up in a situation that I find many small business owners wind up in through no error of your own.
Mhm.
You wound up owing the IRS money. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So we had two different S corps because we had two businesses, and then we had three LLCs because each business had a building, and so those were incorporated separately as their own LLC. So the LLC owned the building, and then there was another investment real estate entity. So there were five entities, and so we did a lot of transactions across entities, paying rent to one, from one entity to
Right.
another,
So
and
you
then yeah.
you and Andy have a sophisticated business structure that most people don't have. Okay, you and Andy, it seems, and Andy's brother was an accountant, you said?
Yeah, he was actually a CPA, so he
You
kind of knew
had,
a few things.
yeah, both these brought a lot to the table, a lot of business knowledge, and yet you still wound up with a problem. And imagine if you went into a business and you had none of that.
Yeah.
That's who is going to be listening to this podcast.
So
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 even
here's
with
here's what
background,
happened. We had a full charge bookkeeper, who had learned all of these. There were a lot of nuances, and every time I had turnover in that seat, because we were big enough to have a full-time bookkeeper slash office manager, full charge bookkeeper, but not big enough to have any kind of additional staff. So it was always one person that
right?
it was always one person. Well, so we had an issue with that person. She left, and we were getting ready to go to Fiji for 2 weeks. This was in 2000. This was in 2010, and we attended a Tony Robbins event at his resort in Fiji, and we were going to be gone for 2 weeks because we were attending that, and at the same time, I was using my timeshare at another place in Fiji, so we were going to be gone for 2 weeks. And oh my God, the full charge bookkeeper is gone. And so I was scrambling to try to figure out how to solve the problem. And I found this bookkeeping service. And, they touted themselves as, bookkeeping and tax and blah, 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 blah. And the guy says, don't worry, we got you covered. And he hired a person who he paid like $11 an hour, but charged us $25 an hour for her, and said,
Right.
I'm going to oversee. I have people who are in all kinds of different businesses. And what you get for that fee is you get her doing the work and you get my oversight. I didn't ask enough questions, and I didn't interview his past clients. And, we were kind of on a crunch. And so I trusted him. And so he put this person in our business, and she had to do not only the bookkeeping, but she had to file sales tax, and she had to do payroll for two different companies. Well, one of our companies was small enough that you could file the payroll tax monthly. The other had
Uh,
the other company, the bigger company, had a payroll burden high enough that the payroll tax needed to be filed bi-weekly, 5 days following the payday. So this, that
yeah,
if
so
you're
this is, let me just point out here, this is the normal business model. This is what I do. I offer full CPA oversight and have bookkeepers doing all the grunt work.
Mhm.
And that way I can provide my services at a lower fee. So you did the right thing.
Except I hired the wrong guy, and he wasn't a
But how
CPA
did,
like you, and he wasn't providing the oversight. So I later learned that he's doing all kinds of other stuff, like he
yeah.
was operating a limousine service, and he was doing all kinds of other things. Like he was like a serial entrepreneur. He had his fingers on a lot of pies, and he wasn't really paying attention. Basically, he gave us a bookkeeper and walked away. And
And now she's got massive responsibilities because the sales tax and payroll taxes are something that they call trust fund taxes,
yep, yeah.
which is,
So
I know what it is. You want to tell people what that is?
Why don't you explain it because you're the CPA?
Okay, so the trust fund taxes is the money that you collect on behalf of the government. If it's sales taxes for the state, if it's payroll taxes for the IRS and the state. So they're trusting you. You have a fiduciary responsibility to pay over those taxes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, not everybody pays them over, as Gina found out. Now, when you have a trust fund tax, there's a potential 100% penalty. So
Yes.
not only are you liable for the tax, you got to pay double that plus interest plus penalties for not paying it. It's massive. And
Yes.
they'll lien your personal. You don't get shielded by the corporation on this either. So
no,
that's
right. They'll come after you personally.
Right.
Yeah.
So what happened?
So what happened is, okay, so we had multiple things going on. So we're paying commercial rent to the entities that, so even though they were all us, the commercial entities owned the real estate. So the corporation paid rent to the LLC that owned the building. Sales tax needed to be paid on that. In the state of Florida, you pay tax on commercial rent. So we had those. We had sales tax on sales. The second business was all service, so there was actually no sales tax on that. But we had a lot of sales tax on our on the bigger flagship business. But the bigger issue was that the payroll on our smaller company was small enough to file the payroll taxes only monthly, but on the bigger one, it had to be done biweekly. So the IRS requires that if you pay on Friday, that by the following Wednesday, that you have deposited the payroll tax using EFTPS. What is EFTPS? The electronic fund.
It goes directly from your bank to the government treasury.
Right. So that was what didn't happen because she filed both of them monthly. And so because and it wasn't that we didn't pay, we paid the payroll tax, but it was paid at the end of the following month instead of within the 5 days following payroll.
Oh, so she wasn't in compliance.
She was not in compliance, and she's just a contractor to a contractor. He's actually paying her on a 1099, and we were paying him, as a service provider. And so there's no liability. It's all entirely on us that we didn't comply with the schedule for paying payroll tax. And
people don't realize this. And I'm sorry to interject, but this is an important point. People don't realize when you sign up to run a business, you're signing documents, and if you look at the fine print, it's saying on the penalty of perjury. I mean, you're legally bound. You can't, too many people just go through business, la-di-da, like not paying attention. So you got to know, what you're responsible for.
Yes.
So go on.
Yes. Ultimately, the business owner is responsible. And ultimately, I mean, I got the ugly letters from the IRS, and they're like, they're saying this is what you owe, and we're going to put a lien on your business and on your personal property, and they'll find every bit of it. They'll find your house. They'll find every bit of it to collect the money owed.
I want you to take me back to when you first started getting those letters. Because first you don't know there's a problem. You get a letter from the IRS. What went through your mind when you opened that?
I didn't understand what was wrong because I said, well, but we paid. I don't understand. And I didn't have access to good advice. Now I have since changed the service that I use, and the service that I use is competent, where they actually have CPAs and tax attorneys and everything available. So today, if I were to get a letter like that, I would be like, hey, I got this letter. What? And we have actually had problems. We had a problem with sales tax once, and they paid the penalty for us because they said it was our mistake. We pay penalties. And that's the difference. That's the difference between a good service and a bad one, that they actually said, we made the mistake. We're going to pay your penalty for you.
You're civilly liable. You know, if I made a mistake and it happens, I pay my clients penalties or I try to get them abated. But now you didn't get hit with the trust fund penalty. You got hit with interest and penalties, I believe, correct?
Yes, but it was almost as much money as what we owed in payroll tax. So here we actually paid the taxes. And so say for example that it was like mid-month payroll that, you know, we like, you know, say the Friday was on the 15th, and so then the payroll tax would have been due on the 20th, and instead it was paid the end of the following month, which is
Right.
what
So
you
they
when
hit
you have
you with a
smaller
late
payroll.
payment penalty. They hit
Right.
you with a late payment penalty, and then there's interest on that.
Right.
And it takes a while. Sometimes it takes a year or two for that to catch up to you, right?
Yeah. It took a few months. And it had happened several times. So you're talking about, depending on the timing of that payroll cycle, you're talking about it was 6 weeks late, 4 weeks late if it was at the end of the month. And for that tardiness, I like, my hair was on fire for how much they were saying we owed, and we paid. It wasn't
so
like
you
we
had
didn't
to,
pay.
you paid the taxes, but your bookkeeper didn't pay them on time.
Right.
You probably didn't even know what the bills were. So you just settled with them. You paid 100% of what they told you to pay.
I didn't feel like I had any recourse, and we didn't have the resources for that. Today, I would handle it differently, but we wrote some big checks because the letters that the letters that the IRS sends you, like, well, first of all, ever since then, anytime I get any kind of notice from the IRS, just seeing the outside of the envelope makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand up.
Yeah, that's what I want to bring out, because, you know, you're a sophisticated business owner. You got experience, you're smart, and yet you get a letter from the IRS and you don't know what it is. It's got to be scary.
It is.
So you got to have, and from what you're telling me, you did all the right things. It could have been a lot worse, believe it or not. Statute of limitations is over on this, but what I do, and I get a lot of clients like this that have problems. A lot of people, you know, they come to me because they have a problem. I'm trying to get new clients and teach them before they start their business.
Yeah.
But what I usually do when there's a penalty and it's because of the accountant or the bookkeeper, you have what they call reasonable cause. And a lot of times you can get the penalties abated. Times have changed, you know, I still can get penalties abated, but I'm just saying this so people know, even if you have a problem, there's always a solution. There's always a solution. And you and Andy are solution people. So, you know, you found out the hard way, like a lot of people do.
You know, it's interesting that you say that, because I do fancy myself sophisticated. I know a few things about how to do things right. I know how to operate a business, but yet having threatening language in a letter from the IRS made me feel completely helpless.
Yes.
Like, oh my God, everything I've ever done right doesn't matter. I'm going to get clobbered. And
the fear might only last a few seconds, but it's powerful.